Hello, welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about two developments. I will try and keep my comments brief so I can take your questions and your answers and your comments. Basically, the first thing that I want to talk to you, or rather share with you, is the comments made by the Secretary General of NATO, and basically, he has threatened that the United States will be imposing sanctions uh, uh, of up to 100% on all countries that are trading with Russia, especially who are buying Russian oil. Uh, and it is unbelievable. This former Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte, who is apparently a very good friend of Dr. Jaishankar, has basically threatened India, and the manner in which he said it was quite troubling. He said that for those who live in Beijing and those who live in Delhi, they should know that they are going to be hit very hard. So it is not really uh, a NATO action, but it is a threat from NATO that Donald Trump has said that in the next 50 days, if Russia doesn't essentially come to an agreement with Ukraine and has a ceasefire, then we will see essentially huge secondary sanctions. If you don't know what secondary sanctions are, basically those companies that will be trading with Russia, they will not be allowed to trade in the United States. If they have assets, those assets could be frozen, and they will not be allowed to basically use dollar. And so there are different kinds of ways in which these companies can be hurt. But Trump, it was not even clear what Trump said. So I'm going to play both the videos for your benefit, so you can decide for yourself. First, I will play the video of Donald Trump essentially making this statement or pronouncement during his meeting with Rutt in the Oval Office, and Mark Rutt in the Oval Office, and then subsequently Rutt's comments as to how he presented the whole thing. So we will look at both of those things, and you can tell me whether it makes any sense at all what Rutt is saying. So here is. Uh, so this is Donald Trump. Uh, Please tell me if you hear his voice.
We are very unhappy, I am, with Russia, but we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs.
So this is what he said. They're not secondary tariffs. They are secondary sanctions. And I don't know how it's going to be tied to tariffs. It's not even clear at all.
For the Europeans. And secondly, that President Trump said, basically, if Russia is not serious about peace talks, within 50 days, he will slam secondary sanctions on countries like India, China, and Brazil. So my encouragement to these three countries particularly is, if you live now in Beijing or in Delhi, or you are the president of Brazil, you might want to take a look into this, because this might hit you very hard. So please make the phone call to Vladimir Putin and tell him that he has to get serious about peace talks, because otherwise this will slam back on Brazil, on India, and on China in a massive way. So I think it was a very smartly, wisely designed announcement yesterday by President Trump, but also the weapons, I think, is very important. And we will find the money in Europe to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to be in the best possible position during these peace talks as soon as they start.
So it's very clear from both the comments that Trump talks about secondary tariffs. There is no such thing as secondary tariffs, but Rutt is making it clear that we are going to be that the U.S. will be imposing secondary sanctions on India, Brazil, and Russia if they continue to trade with Russia and continue to buy Russian oil. So this is something that has been bothering Europe for a long time. Europe has tried its best to reduce its dependency on Russia, and it has succeeded to a great extent. They have cut off oil and natural gas. Germany, which was so dependent on Russia after actually its economy has taken a bit of a hit as it has started buying more expensive oil and gas from the United States and other parts of the world when it used to get very cheap oil and gas from Russia. And many of the European countries have also done that, but still, Europe is still buying oil and natural gas from Russia, but not to that extent. Maybe less than 20% of Russia's exports now go to Europe. So the primary purchasing nations are China and India. So India, if you look at 2021, India's trade with Russia was less than $10 billion, or around $10 billion. But subsequently, since Russia started selling oil to Asian countries at a discounted price, India has been buying heavily to such an extent that last year it was $65 billion, and this year it will be $68 billion of Indo-Russia trade, of which more than 60 to 65%, $65 billion will be just Russian crude and purified oil that is coming to India. India is now 35% of India's entire oil supplies, uh, petroleum supplies come from Russia. So this is big for India. It helps India's economy grow. India is getting one third of its energy at a discounted price rather than the market price. And this has contributed to India being one of the fastest or the fastest growing major economy in the world for the past 2 years. India's growth rates are not as at the level that India wants, but still higher than most countries. It's at 6.2%. And that growth rate will be hit if India has to buy energy at a higher price, which it will have to do if it turns only to Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and United Arab Emirates, the other major suppliers to India. On the other hand, China has been buying over $240 billion worth of oil and natural gas, or rather crude oil from Russia. And so between the two countries, they have basically provided $30 billion of trade. Most of the trade with India is obviously, from India's point of view, deficit, and there is a huge trade surplus for Russia because Russia is not buying much from India. What Russia wants to buy is weapons and ammunition, etc., that India is unwilling to sell Russia, or Russia doesn't want them from India. But it is definitely buying dual purpose technology from China. A lot of it is going into the weapons that Russia is manufacturing. Russia's economy has done reasonably well. In fact, Russia had a trade of about $430 billion last year and in 2023, and $450 plus billion in 2024. It had a surplus of $150 billion. So Russia is exporting more than it is importing. For a country at war, its imports are so low, it's astonishing if you compare that to Ukraine, which is definitely importing a lot, mostly weapons. So the West is totally frustrated, especially Europe is frustrated with their inability to force Putin to come to the table to negotiate. The war has gone on for more than 3 years. It's close to February, and then you can add, this is July the 7th. So next month it will be 3.5 years of warfare. And it is completely devastated Ukraine. Ukraine wants to become part of the West. Ukraine wants to become part of Europe. And Europe wants to expand. NATO wants to expand. EU wants to expand to include Ukraine. Ukraine will be a prize. Once Ukraine is basically separated from Russia, Russia will never ever become an empire. It is basically the if Russia gets Ukraine, then it becomes an empire, and without Ukraine, Russia is not an empire. So the West is determined to destroy Russia. But its disregard for India is astonishing. I mean, so casually that Donald Trump can say that, okay, I'm going to impose 100% tariffs on India and Brazil and China. Brazil, I don't know why he's so upset with Brazil. Maybe because it's part of BRICS, and Brazil's trade with Russia is like 12 to 13 billion dollars total, whereas India's is above 65 billion, and Russia's and China's is over 240 billion dollars. So so the question now, to me, the question is, why is Donald Trump treating India so lightly and with such disrespect and disregard that it is willing to threaten India's economy and relations with India over a war that Trump said was unnecessary and that he would not get involved in? So it's Donald Trump who has reversed his position. He has been, I don't know what to say, persuaded by the Europeans, bullied. We can't say bullied because they're so servile in their approach. So they have persuaded Donald Trump to reverse his position. And of course, the fact that Putin really doesn't seem to care or respect or pay any attention to what Donald Trump is saying is another reason why I think uh, Donald Trump is totally frustrated. He promised to end this war in basically 24 hours. He said that if he was president, this war would not happen. And now he's been trying for close to 5 months to bring Putin to the table to have a ceasefire. The Russia-Ukraine ceasefire is critical for Donald Trump to be able to win the Nobel Prize that he so desperately wants. So it's becoming frustrating for him, and so he's just toggling his policy. Just a week ago, he said, "I'm going to stop all arms supply to Ukraine," and then he reversed his position. So what should India do, really? I think India should simply ignore him for these 50 days, because Donald Trump has said that he's going to decide after 50 days if Russia does not come to the table. So the focus is more on Russia, not on China and India. So the idea of, even in Trump's head, I think that because there's hardly any trade with Russia and the US, so there's nothing he can do in terms of saying, "Oh, I will double or triple the tariffs that you pay." So he does not have direct leverage over Russia economically. So he's trying to go indirectly to cut off its resources. So I think Donald Trump can change his mind tomorrow and say, "Okay, I'm going to impose sanctions today," or he may just forget about it and say something 50 days from now. So I think there is no need for India to act preemptively. So India has already made a mistake, in my opinion, which I wrote about it also a few months ago, by preemptively reducing tariffs before Indian trade negotiating team met with basically the negotiation team of Donald Trump in March, April, May after that. So when Narendra Modi came to meet Donald Trump in February, he had already reduced a bit of tariffs, especially on luxury items from 150 to 75 and things like that. The average tariff that India charges is the highest in the world, which is 17%. And the average tariff that the US charges is 3.5%. So you can see the tariff imbalance already. This is before Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs. So when Donald Trump says that, he says, "Okay, so they are charging us 17.5 on an average across both. We should also take it up to that level, or they should bring it down to our level." And that is where India has a problem, because then India doesn't want to open its agricultural and dairy sector for that. So my recommendation would be that India should not do anything about this. Try to finalize the bilateral trade agreement, and whatever is discussed in the bilateral trade agreement, they should try to say that, make this somehow legally binding, that is final. So once Donald Trump agrees to a particular rate, which probably will be anywhere between 10 and 26%. So the effort is to bring it below 20%. India is trying hard to make sure that the tariff rate goes below. Indonesia yesterday got 19%. So India is probably hoping to get 15%. So once that rate is finalized, then Donald Trump should not have the whim to be able to say, oh, okay, now I will put 100% tariffs on brakes, or I'll put 100% tariffs on people who are trading with Russia. Those options should be completely precluded by this bilateral trade agreement. I hope that that is what will finally be inked when the papers are signed. So that is all I have to say about uh, the 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 threat from Donald Trump and NATO to impose tariffs on India. Now turning towards the Epstein scandal, I did give an update yesterday, and it seems to be continuing. It's not going out of control. I mean, Donald Trump has basically lost control on the MAGA crowd. They're trying their best to shut it out, but it's not happening, as you're familiar. So people are still going not just after Pam Bondi now, they're also going directly after Trump, because Trump is making all kinds of statements which are untrue. So first, the Trump administration's official position now is the memo that was released by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, in which he says there's nothing there. We looked at the videos, they're just child pornography, but there's no proof or evidence or videos of clients interacting with young girls that we can pursue and prosecute. And there is no evidence available for us to look at how Epstein himself, whether he was murdered or whether he committed suicide. They do provide a video in which he's alone, but there's 1 minute missing from the video. So this has fueled a lot of conspiracy theories in the MAGA crowd, and a lot of influencers are beginning to ask the question, please, why don't you release all the files? And how can there be nothing? There is a person who's serving 20 years in prison for sex trafficking. So how can there be sex trafficking and abuse of hundreds of young girls without there being perpetrators? So that is a fundamental question, that you have prosecuted somebody for sex trafficking. So where are the Johns? Where are the customers? Who were these people to whom Epstein was trafficking? And so they are very mad that the Trump administration is trying to cover up basically pedophilia, that rich and powerful people indulge in pedophilia. And of course, there is also this whole theory going on that Epstein was a Mossad agent, and he was basically running this racket to trap and blackmail senior American political officials so that they align their policies with Israel. So that is also going on. So the fear among the MAGA crowd is that either there are some very big names there, maybe Trump himself is in that list of clients that first Pam Bondi said was on her desk, and now she says there is no. Like, she went on Fox News and said, the client list is right there on my desk, and I'm going to review it tomorrow, and then I'm going to release it. And now she said that there is no client list. So that is really, really dumb. There are so many people. I mean, there's so much of evidence of people getting on his planes, his private jet plane, and going to his private island. There should be logs, flight logs. Why aren't they producing the flights to his island and who was on that flight? I mean, people who were on that flight have already talked about being on it. That the pro-Israeli lawyer Alan Dershowitz said he was on that. They say Bill Clinton was that. Maybe Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, who spent many days in the house of Jeffrey Epstein, could have been on that. So there is a lot of conspiracy theories and anger going on in the MAGA crowd. They think that the Trump administration is trying to cover it up. And the reason the Trump administration is trying to cover it up is either there's somebody on that list that Trump is protecting. It could be Trump himself. And there are lots and lots of photographs that are now being released of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump together, and then both of them with very young-looking girls, maybe 16, 17, they look like that. So those photographs are there on social media. We don't know to what extent Trump is involved in it. So that's one issue. But the other argument is, if Trump is not there on it, then perhaps they are hiding all of this to not expose the operations that Israel runs against Americans themselves. We give them billions of dollars, and they blackmail our leaders and trap them. So there is all of this going on, and Trump is not able to control that. On top of that, now Democrats have joined the circus, and they are trying to use congressional maneuvers to try and force them to release the documents. And so there was a vote in the Congress, which was 211 to 210. So basically, the attempt to unseal those files was defeated by just one vote. But what is interesting is that two very prominent Republicans, one in the Senate, Senator Hawley, who is a rising star and could be a presidential candidate in 2028. He's definitely going to run in 2028. And Mike Johnson, the speaker himself, has actually come out on the side of the MAGA people and said that the Department of Justice should release the files. And so, I mean, he's broken from Donald Trump. This is stunning, actually. For Donald Trump, this must be very frustrating and angering that Mike Johnson, who's like his puppet, who was supposed to do whatever the president wanted, is now basically suddenly waking up and saying that he wants to see that list. Because what is happening with the Republicans is that, see, half the Republicans are MAGA. And the MAGA crowd, even though they support Trump, they are demanding from their congressmen that they put pressure on the Donald Trump administration to release the Epstein files. And so we now have a major drama that is going on, which according to Republican and MAGA spokespersons like Steve Bannon, Megyn Kelly, etc., they are trying to say that this is really upsetting. Marjorie Taylor is also very upset. I mean, she's such a loyal fighter for Donald Trump, but she's come out against Donald Trump's support for Ukraine. And she said, this is not what we voted for. You promised us that the US would not get involved in long wars, and now you're bombing Iran, and you're now also giving weapons to Ukraine. This is exactly the opposite of what Donald Trump promised repeatedly during the campaign. So already the MAGA crowd, there are some very important voices who feel that Donald Trump has betrayed the MAGA promise. He's still very popular. The approval ratings of Donald Trump have gone down, definitely, since the Epstein story began. His approval ratings are around 40%, and disapproval ratings are around 54, 55%. So they're a huge margin. It looks like Joe Biden's favorability ratings with about -14, -15. In some cases, it's about -6 or -8. So Donald Trump is facing a crisis of his own making. And this must be putting a lot of pressure on him to get wins on the international front, because on the domestic front, he is having this huge crisis. So people are expecting some kind of a bizarre thing to come out anytime now, so that Donald Trump can distract the media and distract the attention of the influencers from the Epstein files. But the Democrats and some senior Republicans are keeping this whole story alive. So I think this is going to be very, very interesting as to what happens and how long this crisis lasts. If this crisis continues for a few weeks or even months, then it's definitely going to have an impact on the midterm elections. But it's also something interesting. Like I said, it's also dividing the Republican Party. And the issue is increasingly Israel, to such an extent that Tucker Carlson actually gave a speech at a young Republicans convention, in which he basically said that those Israelis who have dual citizenship, who are American citizens and Israeli citizens, and have joined the Israeli army, should be stripped of their citizenship, of the American citizenship. So if you're going to join a foreign country's army, then you should not be allowed to have dual citizenship. And that has really, really upset the Israeli, obviously, because they want to have as many Americans as possible in Israel, because they are able to exercise leverage in both directions. And then there's also this conspiracy theory that people like Tucker Carlson, who are very, very popular, he has the second most popular show right now on the right side of the politics, in the sense on the conservative side. So these are the two developments that are becoming very pronounced and are having an impact. And I think as long as Donald Trump is going to be frustrated with the domestic scene, you will see some erratic comments coming out on the international front. And in this particular statement, where he says, I'm going to impose secondary tariffs, there is no such thing as secondary tariffs, there are secondary sanctions of 100%. So how secondary sanctions are when a particular company says buy something from Russia, and so you will impose sanctions on them. But anyway, so you're going to look at the large entire India's and Chinese exports to Russia, and then you'll impose tariffs on everything that they are exporting to the US. He has not fully understood as to the impact it's going to have on the US economy, because already the inflation is beginning to rise, and that inflation is directly connected to the tariffs. Amazon initially was, I mean, there were rumors or press releases saying that Amazon was going to let people know how much, when you buy something on Amazon, they would have a line there which will say, and the tariffs are this much. So let's say that you're buying a drink for $10. So it will say, well, the drink was $8, now it's $10, and the $2 extra is because of the 20% tariffs that we now have imposed on this import. And the White House just went berserk apparently, and they were so angry that Amazon decided not to do it. Apparently, there are other internet-based sellers who are doing that, but we will see how things go. And August 1st is the key deadline for that. Before that, if India comes up with a trade agreement with the US, then what happens to all these threats against Russia 4 months down the line? Anyway, so that's all I have for you guys today. And as I see that there are actually surprisingly no questions and no comments, that is interesting. And so then I will take a break. And for those of you who would like to do this in Hindi, I will be doing this in another 30 minutes on my India channel, which is Khanversations 2025. And that's where we'll go. Shreyas Patel, my views on Russia, India, China alliance. It's going to be very tricky because India has been leaning so much towards the West for the last few days, for years, the last 3-4 years, that it has alienated China to some extent. And but if you notice, a few days ago, I had done some studies in which I had shown you that if you look at the global economies right now on purchasing power parity, so if you make adjustment for PPP, if you look at the top 4 economies, the number 1 is China, number 2 is US, number 3 is India, and number 4 is Russia. So of the top 4 economies, when adjusted for PPP, RIC are in the top 4. And then if you look at military strength, the top 4 are US and RIC. So in that sense, it is fascinating that, but the problem is that what is happening is that Russia is becoming more and more dependent on China. Many people feel that Russia is a very powerful country. I don't think so. Russia completely abandoned Iran. And Iran was hammered. Russia could not support Iran primarily because it was at war itself, and so it could not supply any air defenses. Iran, I mean, was fighting with old S-300s, and Iran has sold literally hundreds of thousands of drones to Russia and given its drone technology to Russia. So the Russia is now manufacturing Iranian drones in its war against Ukraine. So Russia did not defend Iran at all in this war, did nothing. And the same thing in Operation Sindoor also. Russia did not come to India's help the way China came to the help of Pakistan. So I'm not very sure how committed these countries are to each other. They are aligned in BRICS, they are aligned in SCO, they all want to see a change in the global order, they all want to see a less aggressive and less dominant America. They want to push the West back. But what they are willing to do for that is not enough. So I don't think that, in spite of the potential, the cooperation is not there. India does not trust China. China tries to dominate India. China wants to dominate Russia too. So India is going to be more and more nervous about Russia as Russia becomes closer and closer, or more and more dependent on China. So while there is a logic out there to for these three to come together, even with Iran, but I see no diplomatic initiative. Plus, India wants to be on both sides. India's voting pattern, India's positions that it is taking at the UN Security Council, is anti-BRICS, anti-SCO. So like if Putin would ask me, shall we form an alliance? I said, can you trust Modi? He just runs away to Netanyahu. Is like the a sycophant who's trying his best to please Netanyahu at every vote in the UN that he does is like America's and like Israel's. He doesn't vote like Russia or China. So if India is not voting like Russia and China, which means that their interests are not aligned. And if their interests are not aligned, how can they form an alliance? Uh, what's the future of NATO? NATO's future. Look, if Donald Trump does not withdraw from NATO, then NATO will survive, especially because the Europeans think that Russia is going to attack them. And so they are investing more. They have increased their defense budgets to, they say 3.5% is the goal. Many of them have reached 2%. So individually, each NATO country is becoming stronger militarily, even though their economies are not that great at the moment. So they are going to become militarily stronger, but they are not a force without the US. So if the US were to leave NATO, then NATO is dead. But if the US remains in NATO, and even if it tries to weaken NATO, it will survive. If it survives Donald Trump, then I don't think whoever becomes a president in 2028 is going to withdraw from NATO. J.D. Vance could. And that is the only thing. That if J.D. Vance were to become president in 2028, and then again in 2032, then there will be significant changes, because he's a more, shall we say, stronger isolationist than Donald Trump is. He was against this war and U.S. getting involved in Iran. He was against U.S. even attacking Houthis. So I don't think J.D. Vance is going to be like Trump, oscillating. His policies will be there and they will be consistent. And I think if he becomes president, NATO is dead. Navjot Singh, India, I don't know what happened to the 56-inch chest and all this bullshit we've been listening to from Modi and Jaishankar for the last 2-3 years. Even I was so impressed with it 2-3 years ago until I saw through it, Oh, we want to be strategically autonomous. Well, this is your test. This is your test. You want to show your strategic autonomy, continue to trade with Russia after Trump imposes sanctions. India-US trade is exactly double of India-Russia trade. India-Russia is 65 billion, with India in more than $60 billion deficit. In the sense, India is selling only $2 or $3 billion worth of stuff to Russia and buying about $65 billion worth of oil from them. It's getting at a discount, so it's a profitable deal. India trade with the US is $130 billion, with more than $85 billion are exports, with a trade surplus of $45 billion. So for India, it's very win-win when it comes to trade with the US. And then there are also reimbursements. The remittances that come to India of more than $100 billion that expatriates are sending to India, nearly 25% of that comes from the US. So we are looking at remittances also coming. Investment used to come from the US. We are looking for technology from the US, not from Russia. So India can't afford to break away from the US. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining. So please, if you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others. So take care, everybody. Shreyas, Navjot, thanks for all of your questions. Bye.